Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. We're going to talk about profitability, our first webinar of the new year, and hot topic, and we've got some great data and great sign up. Uri, good to see you, my friend.
Thank you, John. Good to see you as well.
Well, it's good to be seen. My dad used to say that all the time. It's good to be seen. And Steve
Mine
Mabey,
too.
always good to see you.
Great to see you, Uri.
Oh, is this how it's going to be?
Steve's been practicing that all day, John, all
I
day.
say, I've been in front of the mirror practicing that, John.
Is this how we're going to go here? Maybe.
Right out of the gate.
It'll come back
Right out
at
of the
you.
gate.
You know, I don't get mad. I get even.
Good.
So that was in the news earlier this week from one of our potential leaders here in the U.S. So welcome, everybody. We are so glad you're here. We have about 145 managing partners, firm leaders registered for today. As we review the registration list, we have several foreign countries. Bulgaria, managing partner for one of the large firms there. So welcome to those of you who may be joining us for the first time. We're so glad you're here, and most of our audience, U.S. Canadian firms, will present plenty of data, and I think it can apply in just about anywhere your firm is set up to practice law.
John, I think your mic's a little further away than usual.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is that
I think
better?
so, yeah.
Test,
Yes.
test.
That is better.
Yeah, the headsets. We like our headsets. We look very.
I see the three of us. Look at us. We're pros.
We're
pros.
Professionals. Bill Josten is our fourth speaker today, our guest speaker, first time joining us, and he warned us that he may be sliding in real close to our starting time, but we'll pick up and he'll join us when he manages to break free and click on the right buttons. We all convened on Monday afternoon to go through our material, and we think we have a dynamite program, so we'll jump in very, very shortly. We're at the top of the hour, but I'll give it another minute or two to see if we can't get Bill here and any folks coming in shortly after the top of the hour. This is our 44th webinar, Uri. Hard to believe, the 44th in our series.
Yeah, it's been going well. I've enjoyed them. I mean, most of them, John.
Well, I wish I could say the same.
The two old men and the muffins.
To you here. People love our informality, the banter, and we have fun with these programs. We're going to entertain you and keep it moving and give you lots and lots of data. So I'm looking at the time. Bill will join us hopefully in the very near future. So let's jump right in. Steve Mabey, we are so glad you're here. Welcome to our 44th program, Improving Profitability at Your Law Firm. We tune into what managing partners are interested in, surveys, anecdotal feedback. Uri and I are pretty well connected. Steve Mabey really knows that Canadian market. Based upon what we're hearing through surveys, feedback, profitability seems to be top of mind among smaller and mid-sized law firms as we enter the new year. Uri, good to see you. How are things?
Good to see you too. Things are well, thank you. How are you doing, John? Busy much lately?
We've been going gangbusters, out speaking a little bit, and was at the Virginia Bar Association last weekend. We did some live polling. People love it. And of course, getting ready for our big show in May. And we're putting the final touches on our agenda, and we'll be going into full promotion mode next week. Steve Mabey will be with us in Atlanta. Bill Josten will be with us in Atlanta, so you'll have a chance to kind of preview these two folks who are thought leaders within the legal profession. I see Bill is here, so Bill, welcome. And
John, thanks for having me. I warned you I'd be sliding in sideways on this thing.
Hey, we prepped the audience that you might be sliding in, and we're glad you're here. You're on camera, so welcome. Uri and I were just bantering. We were setting up the crowd, and your timing is perfect, introducing today's guest speakers. Bill Josten. Bill and I have been friends for a long time. He is truly a thought leader. works for the Thomson Reuters Institute out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And Bill is among the authors of the 2024 report on the state of the U.S. legal market. They're doing some research on the Canadian market. Bill, welcome.
So great to be here, John. Thanks so much for the invite. I really appreciate it.
Well, we appreciate your being here. Thanks for taking time.
And we have joining us today also is Steve Mabey. Steve, many of you know from our conferences, is a well-known consultant, most famous for writing the book on KPIs for law firms. The book. And if you're really nice to him, he might give you a copy. Steve, is that still accurate?
Yes, we'll send you a PDF of it.
Beautiful.
I think we may include it in the handout materials. As everybody knows, we gather up all the benchmarking data, distribute it afterwards, good fodder to present to your colleagues if you're trying to, make a case for some change. Steve, good to see you. I must comment on the background in your photo. What were you at, a hayride? Where was that taken?
I was going to comment, Uri, that you penetrating glimpse into the obvious. 4 high forehead people wear headsets. Look across the pictures. We all have our headsets on because we have high foreheads. Some little tidbit from Canada for you.
And well, we always appreciate our Canadian tidbits. So welcome, gentlemen. We are so glad you're here. A couple of plugs, then we'll jump in. We are doing our webinar series. This is an exception. Normally we do them third Wednesday, 2 o'clock, try to get in a rhythm, but we really wanted these speakers. And due to scheduling and such, we're off schedule and looking at 3 o'clock on the fourth Wednesday, but we'll be back in sync starting next month. Big leadership conference coming up. Registration's open. We've already got about 40 registrants. So if you want to come, register early. We'll be presenting a fall symposium in Chicago, our newsletter going out. And we collect a lot of stuff on our website, trying to be a good resource for leaders, smaller and mid-sized law firms. If you come to one of our live programs, we give you keys to a listserv and invite you to some Zoom calls, which are really proving to be valuable resources to managing partners.
Yeah, John, these conferences are really the premier place to hang out with other managing partners. I mean, there's just nothing like hanging out with 100 other mid-sized law firms for a day and a half. It's just fantastic. I love the May event.
It's really cool the way people open up, share. Steve, you've been facilitating and appearing on panels for many years now, seeing more and more Canadians. It's really great. And the hard part's getting you out of the office for a couple of days, but once you come and participate, more often than not, you come back. And Bill will be joining us as well. And glad to have Bill and Thomson Reuters back involved in our programming. Best of show webinars. Uri and I did a program last month, kind of showcasing what we learned last year, offering predictions for the coming year. These are the best of show. Uri, if you had to pick one from that list, which one would it be?
I think the best one is the law firm mergers. Merger game one. It's not just about mergers and acquisitions. It's about lateral hires also. What are the types of metrics? How do you do it? It's real specific checklists, very specific, really great guests. So I thought that was my favorite of the year.
Favorite of the year. We talked a lot about the importance of due diligence. If you're, going to bring on laterals, you're thinking about marrying up with another firm. Know what you're getting into before you tie the knot. Chat GPT, or a hot topic. I think it was our most attended just because it's such a hot topic. We won't leave that alone. We'll be back to it. We'll be doing some programming about artificial intelligence, its implications for pricing and how we work. So it ain't going away. That was a hot one. So stay tuned. All this stuff archived on our website. Check it out. We've got the recording. We've got the handouts. We've got recaps. We're partnering with Nine Sale, who writes up some recaps for us, and we really appreciate that. Today's topic is about profitability, today and tomorrow. And we've divided the program into kind of short-term things we can do to improve our profitability today. versus longer term investments in the firm's future profitability. 145 managing partners joining us. We'll ask some survey questions and again, send you a nice recap. And we want your input. When we hang up today, y'all know how it works. We direct you to a survey, real short. What you like, what didn't you like, topics for the future. We really, really key in on that input. And believe it or not, we are listening, we pay attention, and act on what we learn. Thanks to our friends at Nine Sail for their recaps. They're an SEO firm helping firms with social media presence. First polling question, we have 4 of these today. And for Steve and for Bill, just to give you a sense of the firm sizes on today's call. If you would go ahead and indicate the size of your firm in terms of lawyer headcount. And we like to joke that in Georgia, we know how to count votes and we can audit it if need be. But gentlemen, let me go ahead. We've got, boy, you guys are voting fast today. I've got 85% of our people in, and here are the firm sizes represented today. We're all about mid-law, defining that as 25 to maybe 200 lawyers. And as you can see, our attendance reflects that. So with that, let's jump in and share some data we collected when you registered. The first question we presented, and we'll ask Bill and Steve to talk a little bit about this, Uri, you as well, and we'll showcase this data and then offer some strategies to improve profitability. From the list below, your firm's primary strategy to improve rates this year. Bill Josten, what do you think? Is that the right things to be focusing on?
Well, I think yes. I want to backtrack just a second though and say, Steve, 4 high foreheads with headsets is the worst boy band name ever. Like, I just want to put that out there to start with. All right.
Love it, Bill.
But no, getting to the actual questions that people care about instead of my weird little pop culture mind farts. I think this is true. I'm encouraged by a few things, and I would call out a couple of things. One, I'm encouraged that only 48% are pointing to rates. I'm not surprised that rates are number one. I am a little surprised, honestly, that it's only half that are saying, especially when talking your primary strategy for improving.
Yeah, that was the way we phrased that question, generates a certain answer. We asked them to pick one from a list.
I would have expected this to be in the 60s or 70s, candidly. So to see it only at roughly half, to me, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
When we look at overall indications of the market, if you go and look at our 2024 State of the U.S. Legal Market Report that just came out a couple weeks ago, clients are being very, very clear with us that they are seeking lower cost law firms. So the attendees on this webinar are in a sweet spot. They have a cost advantage. Now, there's more to it than just being cheap, right? You have to be cheap. What they're looking for, clients are looking for this weird mix where they want cheap with global reach and high specialization. Like, they want access to market leading experts with global reach, but they don't want to pay a lot for it. Well, I'm sorry, but that's kind of like, you can have quality, you can have fast, or you can have cheap. You can't have all three. Like, you can get 2 out of 3. You can't get all 3. It's the same thing for clients here. You can't get all 3. But rates are obviously a big concern. A ton of the work that I've done in the thought leadership realm for the last 10 plus years has focused on the second thing on this list, which is improving billing and collections.
We're going to come back to you on that.
So much,
Bill. We're going to come back to you. I got a nice set of slides that are going to hammer home your point on this and realization and the leakage.
Yeah.
And
I just love seeing it in second place. I think that's great.
Yeah, this is consistent. We've asked this question a couple of times, different audiences, Uri and I, and we're fairly consistently the rate raising and getting a better job on our timekeeping, billing, collections practices. Steve, any comments from you on what we learned with this polling result?
I'm right in line with Bill in the sense that I've told my clients I think they can make more money to their bottom line by increasing the realization
Yeah.
and more timely collections and save on interest expense, then they're ever going to get full rack rates. And so they can increase 4%, 10% if they want, but they're not going to see it. I mean, a lot of clients, everything you read, clients are as Bill, looking for the unicorn when it comes to providing legal services and paying for it. So I think with no extra time, realization and collections is going to put more money in your partner's jeans pockets. We don't have dress pants up here. Put it in your jeans pockets much quicker and to a greater degree if you focus on that. But I'm not, like Bill, I'm not surprised that people are going to say, oh, we're going to raise rates. That, that's the war cry. We have jeans up here.
Jeans, really? Okay. So yeah, we see this consistently. It's good to see manage expenses. We're going to talk about sort of, short-term profitability versus investing in the future and the inherent conflict sometimes you might have around that. We asked a second question, and that's your plans for 2024 in terms of rate increase. Uri, what do you think? My goodness, that's aggressive.
It is aggressive. You didn't ask me, but I'm just going to opine on the previous slide, John.
Okay, you
know,
may.
There's so much emphasis on this this great strategy of raising rates, and I don't think, I mean, it's the obvious, should be part of the business practice and should have been for a year. Your rate should be appropriate, period, full stop. And I know the rest of our webinar and our time today is going to be talking about other things but raising rates, but it should be just part of standard procedure. Standard operating procedures, your rates should be appropriate. What is appropriate? You could define that. We have some clients where they say we're always a half to 60% of big law. That's fine. That's your strategy, and it should be consistent. What I think we've seen is the last couple of years, people played a lot of catch up. They got scared, and there was that widening gap, and they woke up the last couple of years and they said, oh my goodness, we're way behind. And B, with this raging inflation, we can, sort of go through the cover of the night that nobody will see what we're doing or realize what we're doing. But of course, they always should have. Now, related to this slide that you asked me about, yeah, we've been seeing this, and I think it's just continuing inflation. Now's the time to catch up to where we really should have been all along.
Right. And we've been preaching, Uri. We did the program in New York in November. Yeah. We did a number of programs about rate setting and be aggressive. If you don't ask, you won't get, but build it in every year. It's something you do 3-4% every year. That's the default. And so often smaller firms let it slip for 6-8 years. And, now we're asking for a big increase and surprised why we get some pushback. So, be assertive, be confident. If you don't ask, you won't get. And this is some pretty good data if you've got some partners back at your firm who are a little sheepish about jacking rates. Now is the time. We've talked about that in previous programs. We've heard about alternative fee arrangements forever, but it looks like the billable hour does remain king. 2/3 of firms on this call, less than 10% of your revenue is coming from alternative fee arrangements. Bill, what are you seeing in your reports trending around alternative fee arrangements?
Well, we saw alternative fee arrangements are one of those terms that never existed prior to about 2009. And between 2009 and 2013, probably, it grew to become maybe 20% of total law firm revenues, but then it plateaued there. And it's been pretty stagnant for the last 10 years. What we're seeing now, and this was really sort of in evidence even before the true advent of generative AI, but we're seeing a move or an interest on the part of particularly corporate clients in alternative fee arrangements. A lot of individual consumer clients that people on the call may be dealing with they may already be working on some form of an AFA or a fixed fee type of a basis. If you're doing wills or divorces, criminal divorce, a lot of that stuff is already, that's already done on a fixed. But clients are getting a lot more interested in fixed fee arrangements. We saw in the State of the Legal Market Report this year, 54% of clients that we interviewed, and this is GCs at corporations, and I want to say they're all $1 billion or larger businesses. So these are not tiny little mom and pop shops. we saw 54% of GCs say that increased use of AFAs will be a significant portion of their cost control strategies in 2024 and beyond. To me, that's an important statistic. And so with my position with Thomson Reuters, I lead the thought leadership efforts for the Thomson Reuters Institute on both the buy side and the sell side. So basically, if you have a JD or work for someone with a JD anywhere in the world, my job is to curate thought leadership content for you. So I work on both the buy and the sell sides. And I get asked by GCs all the time, well, when are our law firms going to start giving us better AFA options? And my candid answer to them is as soon as you start agreeing to them, because we see a lot of discussion from GCs about, oh, well, we want to do more with AFAs. Yet when they're presented with AFA options, they go, okay, but what would this be by the hour?
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, they'll agree to an AFA, but then they want to see the shadow bill behind it. And to me, shadow bills are the most insidious thing to kill innovation that you could potentially come up with.
Shadow bill.
So there, I think, is a strong potential for AFA growth in 2024 and beyond. I think it's incumbent on law firms to not only create those options and offer them, but to educate around them. And if you can do that in a way that's advantageous to both you and your law firm and your client, and communicate the value of the pricing device that you're suggesting, you're in a situation where you can move that client conversation far beyond just the particular price, where you can really start to own a standard around what that conversation should be like. And you can go back to the client and say, we've had these conversations with you around pricing, and we're just asking for a little bit of feedback. What are some of your other law firms telling you about some of these pricing deals? Best answer you can possibly get is, you're the only one talking to us about this.
Well, remember the ACC Value Challenge, back, 8 years ago? Susan Hackett, she's been on our faculty before and leading the charge on the ACC Value Challenge. And there were some firms really jumping into that, and the billable hour's dead. And I recall one firm in Chicago, on their homepage of the website, it had a clock with a bullet hole in it, killing the billable hour. Are you surprised by this data, this slide we're looking at right here and now, this audience? Or is this kind of about what you're seeing in terms of real life, how we bill for our services?
When we ask similar questions, 94% of respondents routinely tell us that the majority of their time is still done on a billable hour arrangement. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, there's still a definitional problem with AFAs even. A lot of people will say, oh, well, we apply heavy discount. That's our AFA. No, that's not
discounted rates are not alternative fees. Right, exactly.
Right. I mean, the closest you're going to hear me agreeing to an AFA being hourly basis is a blended rate. But discounts are not an AFA.
No.
Caps are not an AFA. Budgets are not an AFA. In fact, for the law firm leaders, be very wary of caps. You cannot win as a law firm under a cap. It's just not going to happen. There's no way. Clients, a lot of times what they'll be proposed for an AFA is a collar. They're getting very leery of collars.
Yeah.
Those types of things. There needs to be a conversation had across the industry about what the next generation of AFAs is going to look like. There are groups out there that are doing a lot of work in this. Large law firms have teams of people dedicated to this.
Yeah, directors of pricing. We're seeing those folks popping up at Big Law. And
I literally slid in on this call.
Yeah,
I literally slid in on this call because I was on a call prior hour with about 40 of the largest pricing directors in the country, actually in the world. So when you talk about those people, they're actually really good friends of mine. But a lot of what they're doing is being written about. It's being talked about.
Yeah, it is.
So listen to podcasts.
I've heard a lot of firms, our crowd, anecdotally, I hear, we presented the notion of alternative fee arrangements to some of our top clients, but at the end of the day, what they're pushing for is a discounted rate. And, we're trying to engage. The clients don't seem all that interested. I've heard that anecdotally, but artificial intelligence and its impact on pricing is something to pay attention to.
Yeah, so that could be huge. It's going to be huge.
A lot of discussion around that.
John,
let me jump ahead.
John, in your practice, I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
What are you seeing? Turn the ship around and say, when you're doing your consulting, are you doing alternative fee arrangements, or are your clients still looking for the billable hour?
I work a flat fee because I'm a lousy timekeeper.
Yep.
So I have a prescribed scope of services. Here's what you get. We come off scope, then we'll talk and maybe trigger an hourly rate. And I have a special file because I write it down like an old person. and I shortchange myself.
Sure.
I every time I shortchange myself because I don't track time contemporaneously. I'm horribly inefficient, and I know that. So I don't try to bill hourly. What about you, Steve? Are you doing hourly or flat fee work?
I start with flat fee, but
Yeah.
I still have a lot of clients who like the billable hour, maybe because we're quick and we get it done, and they think they get a better deal. You know, and to Bill's point, yeah, people are looking for shadow bills. Well, Steve, that's a nice flat fee, and I think I like that, but could you track it by hour too, so I can see what the difference is? And you know they're going to pay the lower of. So
You're
it's
just giving them ammunition.
And to that point, Steve, with the work that I do, we do everything flat. We don't have an hourly rate. We price based on head. So, you know, depending on the number of heads that we're working with at a firm, we price based on the head, and we have a minimum. You know, where we just don't do, when we're doing our consulting work, we just don't do it for less than a certain dollar amount. And I've got to be able to defend that. You know, I mean, but frankly, with the stuff I'm doing around rates and revenue, and I mean, if we're talking about things that will provide a 5 to 10x multiplier, it's relatively easy to justify from an ROI standpoint. But hourly just doesn't enter into the equation. We don't do anything based on the hour. And frankly, I kind of put it back to the client and say, why would you want me to? Yeah, I mean,
Bill, you have to throw Steve and I some of your crumbs, you know.
Yes.
Yeah, right. I mean, not that I wouldn't, but like I have crumbs.
And remember, Bill, I've been nicer to you. I'm going to advertise that Thomson Reuters is going to do its first Canadian report.
All right.
I'm giving you a plug. He's doing a first Canadian report in February.
All right, so I'm going to plug. Here's the report. We're going to send this to you after the call. So, Bill, am I buying favor here?
Yeah, like I said, it's not that I wouldn't throw crumbs to you. It's that I don't have crumbs. I mean, I would love to have the Marie Antoinette of, like, you know, let them eat cake. But, you know, truthfully, the advisory work that the Thomson Reuters Institute does is very, very nascent. So we're still trying to build our brand. That's why opportunities like this are so beneficial to us. And I very much appreciate being able to get out and talk, because it's a great way to build a little bit of notoriety and a little bit of recognition. So I do genuinely thank you for that. I would be happy to refer work on, and if there is the opportunity to do that.
These people don't want to hear about that.
Let's get to profitability.
Yeah, let's get to
profitability. I felt bad for
profitability
laughing in the reaction.
for law firms who are thinking, if I want to hire Steve or John, I just learned something. Anyway, short term, long term, we decided we'd frame our conversation and talk about some short term things you all could do tomorrow if you wanted to pull the lever and maybe pull out a hammer. So let's look at some of the short-term strategies. Uri, you were going to kind of set us up here and lead us into this segment.
Yeah, and short-term strategies compared to the long-term strategies, this is some things and ideas that we got from Steve and Bill that you can do right now. So our first big idea for today is the day is basic hygiene. And here we're talking about billing.
What do you mean? Deodorant, Uri? What are you talking about?
I'm getting to it, John. Billing, tracking your time, collections. Steve, talk to us about what's low-hanging fruit on, or what we'll call basic hygiene here.
I would start with, and I said this previously, the fastest way to put money in your pockets without working any more hours or without having to tangle with clients about rate increases is increase your realization, your net realization, both the realization when you bill, but also what you collect. That puts more money in your pocket faster than anything, because those are existing clients. You've already paid to develop that client. You've already got a relationship. So all you're doing is trying to improve your own efficiency on kind of hygiene things like realization. One of the things that we talk about, instead of doing all the rate increases, and rate increase is important. John pointed out, every year that you don't have a rate increase, you have a hole in your revenue gap somewhere along the line. And so, but one of the things is that we've come to do is we just blanket bill. And by that, I mean, what are the rates? And we bill rather than saying, this project should have these rates. This project should have maybe lower rates. This project should have higher rates. I guarantee you your revenue increases if you take the time to say, this file shouldn't be at standard, should be above standard, below standard. But we don't do that. What's in the system? And that's what we bill. Whatever's in the system and pops out of the system, we bill rather than looking at it and saying, gee, I think this is worth more. We save, if you save the clients 100,000, you can't bill them 75. But if you save them 10 million, maybe you can bill 100,000 or more. But we don't look at it. We just take what's in the system, and that's what we do.
When I think of basic hygiene, I think of timekeeping practices. If we're working the billable hour, let's get serious about tracking time, tracking it contemporaneously. And there are penalties, rewards for folks who get that right. We're training people. That's pretty basic. And, there are apps. I'm shocked at how sloppy a lot of smaller mid-sized firms are around capturing time and passing through the bills to clients and just basic stuff that, get a handle on that. Get your time in, folks, every day, not at the end of the week, the end of the month, every day, and really build that into your culture. And there are consequences if you can't do that. Bill, what you got? Basic hygiene. I don't know. I think of hours, rates, timekeeping, billing practices, intake, and being selective when we bring in new clients, new work.
So for me, intake is both short and long term. You had the signpost there. Intake is, or not intake, but hygiene is both in short and long term. Hygiene is something that we can improve in the short term and have dramatic effects in the positive very, very quickly. It's also something we had to focus on long term. We saw this in the market. I did a report. If anyone on call wants to just Google law firm rates in 2023, this is literally a report that we did. And I'm happy to send it out with the follow-up materials afterwards as well. But we did a report that looked at realization. John, Steve, you talked a lot about realization. Firms did a really great job of improving realization from basically the onset of the pandemic in Q2 of 2022 all the way up to the end of 2021.
I'm going to jump ahead on, now that we're talking about realization, and I love this image.
Well,
Bill, your slide's up next. You're
okay, great. But so this idea of hygiene, we got very, very hygienic around our billing in 2024 or in 2020 and 2021. We saw the industry improve average realization, collected realization by 1.5 points or better over the course of that time frame. Well, now we've gotten soft on it again. So when I say it's a short-term thing, we improved it very quickly in the short term. Long term, we're softening up on it. Now we're down almost a full percentage point from where we were at peak. That has a massive add-on effect. And I'm going to follow up on another thing from Steve. Steve, you talked about sort of being able to differentiate the value of the work and how we're going to rate it. I hear from a surprising number of law firms when they talk about their rates. We want to be the Walmart of law firms, right? And what they mean by that is we want to be the place that people can go for, we want to be. I'm not sure that that's the compliment that they think they're giving themselves, but like they want to be something that's seen as cost effective, where you can come in and get everything you need. Well, okay. But if we're really going to play that analogy out, you think about the number of items on the shelf at a Walmart. All of those items are not priced identically. Every single one of them is priced to within tenths or hundredths of a percent in terms of target margins. When they do a price rollback at Walmart, it's not just let's throw something at a dartboard and see what price we should reduce by what right now. It is all highly, highly calculated. So if you want to be the Walmart of law firms, play that analogy out completely. Think about how that's impacting your margins. Think about how that impacts your costs. And I don't mean your costs, what your client pays to you. That's your fee. That's your price. Your cost is what it costs for you to have a butt in the seat and the lights on in your law firm. think about how your costs interplay with your fees, interplay with your rates. All of that has to go into your profitability. It's things that you can influence short term that have very long term effects. So if you want to be the Walmart of law firms, you have to be able to do that. The other thing I would say, just as a follow-up comment, John, you were talking about contemporaneous entry of time. To me, that's a great start. That is far from the end all be all.
Oh no, that's just an example of something that
Yep.
if you have the courage to enforce minimum billable hour expectations, getting your time in, getting your bills out.
I would say yes, but, and pardon me here, it's a pretty big but. It's.
Are you talking about me, Bill? Are you talking about me? Okay.
No, I'm very self-referential there. But you talk about having a way, an enforcement mechanism. That can be a very dangerous thing too. Contemporaneous time entry, not a bad thing. Very much a best practice, should be highly focused on. If you put too large of a stick on what we call the write down, if you follow my writing, I talk about write downs in two different ways. So I make a difference between write downs and write offs. Write offs are what the client does to us on the invoice. Write down is what we do to ourselves at the pre-bill stage. When you talk about write downs, though, there's also two different kinds. There's what hits WIP and gets written down, so we can see that. If you're talking about we're going to put contemporaneous in, we're going to have enforcement mechanisms in place to make sure that hits the bill. Well, you can create a perverse incentive there, where you actually incentivize what we call a silent write down. And that is, it's not, oh, geez, I don't remember what I did. I'm going to make up a number and there's going to be leakage there. That's a problem, but that's not the problem I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is I did it. I know I did it. I know I'm not going to be able to bill it. I'm never going to put it in WIP. And if there's a strong stick on the write down side, what you ultimately end up incentivizing is you end up incentivizing larger silent write downs. And in my theory, silent write downs are far more detrimental because business school axiom, you can't manage what you don't measure. You cannot measure silent write downs. You're exactly, Yuri. So with this pipe here, every one of these leaks, I can see those. Put half this pipe underground. That first big one that you see on the piling that's nearest to us, if that's underground, I can fix everything downstream and I still got a problem, right?
So to John's point, and Bill, I jump in here, I did a straw poll at the end of 2023, and in 2023, the clients spoke to, less than half still get their time in daily. Everybody else is weekly and monthly, and the leakage, when we're talking about leakage, is
crazy.
I have a hard enough time remember at the end of the day what I did, and I like to think, I'm a little bit conscious about time.
Well,
but
let me get you a mirror, Steve.
Okay, but what I'm saying is, if in 2023, and we've had the billable hour for eons, only half of firms are recorded on a daily basis. I mean, there's leakage there, and I'm not telling them what to bill. I'm telling them to use their judgment, recording their time and all that stuff, to Bill's point, but still, the leakage is just palpable.
And it accumulates all along the way between the hours worked versus build and collect. I mean, just, collapsing that and, getting serious about it. I think can result in immediate impacts on your profitability today. Bill, let me bring up your chart you asked to insert in our show, and
because for that short-term improvement,
what we're looking at here.
So this is from that Law Firm Rates in 2023 report that I mentioned before that I'm happy to share. And by the way, John, I'll take this. We'll pull the figure number off of it. I've already talked to my marketing team about this. We'll make this into a nice little PDF so that the folks on the call can have this as a standalone that they can share around with their firms as well. I'll get that to you in the next couple of days. But for this report, we just created a hypothetical. I said, let's create a hypothetical firm where our average work rate, and when I talk about a work rate, what I'm talking about is an agreed rate. The client has agreed to pay me this hourly rate to do this work for them. The average work rate at my firm is $500 an hour. Based on industry averages, and when I talk about the industry averages, it's hard to see in the small type there, but it says based on a Q1 2022 realization of 91.3%. Where that number comes from is from a system. So under 40 450,
Right
650
here, right?
there. Yep, in the fine print underneath.
That 91.3
91.3.
key
Yep.
number.
So that is a number that's derived from a system that we run called Financial Insights. People may have heard of Peer Monitor in the past. What that is a financial benchmarking tool that we have that we plug into the financial management systems of about 220 firms globally. About 180 of those are domestic. And they're split about 50% of the AmLaw 100, 50% of the AmLaw Second 100, and then about another 100 or so firms or 90 firms in what we call mid-size, which is outside of the AmLaw 100. That ranges from probably 35 layers up to maybe 300, 350. We extract 65 metrics a month that we look at. It's all anonymized. I can't tell you, I couldn't even tell you what firms participate. And if I knew what firms participate, I couldn't tell you the realization rate in any given firm. That's all blind. But the average realization for those firms in Q1 of 2022 is 91.3%. That's where that number comes from. So that's not a made up number. That is a real number. That is what the average law firm in the market experienced as a collected rate against their agreed rate in Q1 of 2022. So you apply my hypothetical $500. My hypothetical firm would have collected about $456.50 against that. There's a gap there of $43.50. Apply, again, industry standard rate growth from 22 to 23. My $500 an hour rate is now $528.50. You apply, again, that same average realization rate. My realization has now improved to $477.24, right? We're making more money. This is a good thing. But the gap between my worked and collected rate is now $51.26. So it's actually increased by $8 over the course of that year. So yes, in terms of raw dollars, I'm realizing more, but the gap between that worked and collected rate has gotten bigger. Now, sidebar for a second here, what drives that gap? It's really easy to point a finger at the clients, right? And say, well, this is clients pushing back. They don't like working with law firms. They take discounts to do it. All that's true. None of it matters. Truthfully, none of it matters. I have a slide in a different deck. This is actually what I was just talking to all these pricing directors about. How much can we blame the client? In reality, not as much as we'd like to, because the majority of this is actually driven by internal behaviors at the law firms. Steve, I know your former firm at Stewart McKelvey, they did a ton of work. I met Paul Saunders at an event. He was doing a presentation. I swear to God, I'm sitting in the audience going, this guy read my book. Like, what he was doing is literally the stuff I've been writing about. He had never heard of me. I'd never heard of him. We were just following the same path. So like we hit it off like fast friends because we had come up with the same theory here. But it was largely driven internally. A metric that we call billing realization, the percent of your work rate that gets billed to clients, and a metric that we call collected realization, your agreed rate that is collected from your clients. Those two numbers travel in parallel. If your billing realization improves, your collected realization improves. If your billing realization declines, your collected realization declines. Look at the rates report, the numbers are there. They don't lie. I didn't doctor them. We're not gaming the system. This is not me creating hypotheticals in the data to prove my point. This is what the data has shown us. You can't argue with the math. We know this is true. So when we see this gap of that additional $8, on average, 6 of those $8 are because of a decline in billing realization over the course of that year. So it's self-inflicted damage. If we look at how do we improve that, we talk about short-term improvements and how basic hygiene is both a short-term and a long-term thing. Every 1/10 of a percentage point improvement here yields me an additional $5.29 an hour. Now, Frank, who gives a crap about $5.29, right? You can't even buy a Starbucks anymore for that, not even in Canadian money.
Ooh, zing.
I just had to make sure you're paying attention, Steve. But you take that and you cost it out. $5.29 an hour. If my hypothetical law firm here is 100 lawyers, each of them billing and collecting against $1,700 a year, that's $900,000 in additional collections from 1/10 of 1 percentage point improvement. You know how long it takes to realize a 1/10 of a percentage point improvement in realization? Less than a quarter. And most of that has nothing to do with the client.
Boy, that's a lot of
You can do it through
Starbucks right there.
basic financial management. If you do basic financial management to improve your billing realization, take a larger percentage of what hits your WIP and get it through to an invoice, you're going to see a positive result. So that basic financial hygiene ties into the realization. Whereas if we can do the financial hygiene things, it will result in better bottom lines. It will. And what have we not talked about? We didn't talk about expenses. Expense management's hard. We didn't have to talk about expenses. Changing client behaviors is next to impossible. We didn't have to talk about that. We didn't have to talk about outside counsel compliance and all these other things. What we're literally talking about is look at your WIP and do a better job of driving your WIP to your invoices.
Yep.
That's it. If you can do that to the tune of 0.1%,
it's impactful. Yep. No doubt about it. And I think, what I encourage firms to do is a little law firm economics 101 for everybody. So they understand these concepts and how important realization is. And just a tiny little improvement has huge impact on the bottom line. I'm looking at our time. We've got 17 minutes left here. So this is a question we've asked a little bit, which is who's doing the rate setting at your firm? Does the firm have a standard hourly rate schedule? Do you leave it to the practice groups, the offices? It's up to the individual, or heck, we have one of these pricing director people you talk about here. We like a standard hourly rate schedule, and if you come off it, it requires some approval. The partners aren't allowed to price whatever they want. They tend to leave money on the table. I'm going to ask for your prediction, Steve, maybe on where you think most firms on this call are setting their prices. I've got about 70% of the vote counted. So come on in, folks. Steve, give me your prediction. Where firms set prices?
What I would see is it's a combination of firm and individual. The firm suggests a rate, and the individual says yes or no, and you come up with a rate. But it starts with the firm, or a lot of these folks on the call proposing rates based on last year's actual and what they're going to do for rack rate increases and that. But in the final analysis, if you don't have buy-in by the individual, it's the individual that controls because they do the billing.
Do they? Not in all firms.
No, not in all firms, but
in most
firms.
small or mid-sized firms, there's a lot of
Sure.
autonomy around this, and how I set rates and intake and all that good stuff. Uri, you want to offer up a prediction?
Well, I mean, I know firms should have a strategy. Firms should give this thought, and people will say the firm does it, but I am shocked constantly how many firms confide in me the messes they find, the deals that their individual lawyers signed,
Right.
and it is a mess. It is an absolute mess. So it gets to me. If some of them become messes, I bet a lot of them are not standard, and a lot of them are getting deals on the back end and the front end. I mean, really all over the place. So I think it's much worse than this slide shows.
Our speaker last month, or I guess December, when we honed in on profitability, said allowing individuals to price their rates is a bad practice. There needs to be somebody and making sure we're getting the rates. We're not offering pro bono unintentionally. So that's an interesting conversation. Do we have a standard hourly rate schedule? Maybe a premium hourly rate schedule. Maybe we have a discounted rate schedule for our defense clients, but being deliberate, setting rates at that firm level is a best practice. And if you come off rate, you need some approval from an intake committee, a department head, something like that. Steve, maybe this is one of your favorite questions. You wanted to say something, sir?
Yeah, the other part that scares me about rates is how many firms still exist out there that are seniority-driven rates. In other words, I could be a hot shot M&A, but because the senior partner only bills $500 an hour, or I'm locked down at $400 or $375, whereas my contemporaries out there are billing $1,000, $1,200 an hour, and just the lost revenue because I'm not getting to bill what I should bill for the value that I add. And it's amazing the number of firms that are, lockstep or seniority driven, whatever you want to call it, hourly rates. It's just like you're saying, you're just throwing money out the window.
I
Forget
couldn't agree. And same
expenses.
thing on the compensation side. That seniority-based lockstep. No, that's not a best practice. Performance. Seniority might factor into it, but performance, I think, is much more important. Steve, you love to talk about KPIs. So we ask this question from time to time, and if you would, everybody, pick one. You as a firm leader, which KPI from this list are you honing in on most closely day in, day out? Steve, talk to us about KPIs, what you think should be among the key KPIs, and then we'll look at what our audience is saying.
Yeah, I wish people would focus more on fees collected. I have a saying that when I go to Sobeys, they don't take billable hours, they take cash for my groceries. And
Where
so
do you
I wish
shop?
that
What's the name of the store?
I just hope that we would focus more on the revenue side, but by and large, the stat or the KPI that most people could tell me is the number of billable hours per lawyer, and that's important to monitor and for a lot of different reasons. But in this day and age, it shouldn't be the key. I mean, I think you've heard everybody say we lose so much money at the revenue or at the time of billing that the billable hours per person shouldn't be the most popular, but I would bet hours billed is going to be of the ones on that list. Hours billed will be a
I did.
dominant
I
one.
had a very limited list here. That as I was working up this list, I'm thinking, geez, how do I narrow it down
Yep.
to 5 or 6 choices? Bill, what do you think are our key KPIs firm leaders should hone into to kind of assess profitability?
Boy, you know what? Honestly, I'm looking at everything on this list except origination credit. I really don't care who gets. I don't care who gets credit for the origination. I want to know how much money the firm is making off of it. Who gets the credit for it isn't as important to me as what it does to the firm. Fees collect. For me, this is a great result. Fees collected more than hours billed. I mean, I've had this argument with managing partners before where I can prove to you in about 15 seconds that the hours don't make a difference. And they'll say, no, the hours are always the most important. Well, no, that's not true, because I'll tell you, if I build 2,500 hours this year, did I have a good year? Well, yeah, of course. If I build 2,500 hours a year and I build it at $1 an hour, did I have a good year? And they just kind of go silent. I said, well, there you go. Right there, the hours don't matter. What if I did 1 hour, but somebody paid me $1 billion for it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Now,
one phone call could, make or break a big deal. One phone call to the right person at the right time could be worth a lot of money to a client.
Yeah, fees collected, I think, is great, because then you can take that as a function of expenses and figure out your profitability metrics. But that fees collected, I think, is really, really a vital metric, and to see people focusing on it, I think, is awesome.
Cool. Yeah, it's not about, you can't buy stuff with hours, right? We need some damage. Boy, we have let the time run. We got 10 minutes. I'm gonna roll. Short term foundation, get it solid, so that when you're playing this game with your friends, the tower doesn't fall on you. But you got a good foundation. We're doing a good job with the hygiene, the basics. Longer term.
John, close the poll. Close the poll.
Good point. Good point. I asked Uri to nudge me on that when I forget to do that, because but there's our little Jenga set, and building that good foundation so the tower doesn't fall. Important. Now, once we got our good foundation, Steve, you contributed some things. Bill, I'll ask you to weigh in. We've got 9 minutes, so we're going to go rapid fire. Long-term strategy to improve your firm's
I'll do mine real quick because it's not going to be some of the stuff we've talked about. To me, the best number one driver of long-term profitability is courage. And why I say that is to have the courage to have the tough conversations, the courage
Steve,
to make
take away my closing slides. Stick
the
to your
courage to make the tough
here.
decisions, and the courage to execute on those decisions. That's the driver of long-term profitability. When we look at all these things that we say we're going to look at in the short term and all the issues most firms face, what the driver is, do you have the courage to have those conversations, to make the decisions, and then execute on them? That's the best driver of long-term profitability in law firms, courage. Go ahead. Sorry, John.
What's this about? This is what you told me when you asked me the topics you want to discuss. Technology and focus, specialization. concentrating on more profitable niches and not trying to be Walmart, all things to all people, lowest prices always. No, we're running a boutique and we're the best in the business at what we do. Not everyone
Yeah.
can afford that.
Yeah. Hold on before you get past it, John. That idea of specialization. The data that we've got from interviewing clients, and we do about 2,200 general counsel interviews a year, and they're all open-ended questions that we then, the great thing about qualitative responses, if you hear the same thing often enough, the qualitative becomes quantitative. That's a lot of what we do with our GC research. And one of the things that they're telling us is their biggest favorability driver for their outside counsel right now is specialization. GCs will describe themselves as the Swiss Army knife. They can do a little bit of everything. When they need outside counsel, they need a special outside counsel that can do a particular thing and is the best at it. So that idea of specialization in terms of long-term strategy, both from a practice development standpoint and an individual professional development standpoint, build an expertise, make that expertise known, and figure out what are the expertise areas that we need to build within our firm. And that's not to say you don't have to be a firm that does a specific thing. If you want to be a general service firm, that's great, but have a wide stable of experts and take the long-term view to build that.
I agree. Collection of specialists versus a collection of generalists. I think specialization, it's what we read about. Lawyers often reluctant to niche because, I want to take in anything and don't want to preclude, taking on something. And boy, you get into these websites and all things to all people, and boy, it just doesn't resonate much with anybody. And I use the fishing analogy, and notice we got a mentor and mentee and helping the young lawyers, find their way to how we're going to catch sailfish, grouper, whatever it is we have our sights on. Investing in business development. I'm going to run fast here, guys. So, making sure, long term. Our young lawyers are learning how to bring clients to the firm. So business development and leadership development are showing up within law firms. Guess what, folks? This costs money and may impact your short-term profitability, these longer-term investments in future profitability. Meister talks about it, billable hours for today's income, what we do with our investment time, non-billable, that's going to determine our future. I'm going to jump ahead, ask this to close. And we referenced it a little bit, which is this tension if we really start to hone in on profitability by matter, by client, by office, that can be pretty divisive. If we start to shine the light on unprofitable practice areas or unprofitable offices, and we want this collegial collaborative culture, and we're going to start to call people out, call practice groups out. Bill, why don't you talk to us a little bit of that kind of tension between disrupting our culture versus running a hard-nosed business focused on profitability?
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily that the two need to be in tension, but they are in a certain sense. I mean, I work for a huge corporation, right? We are very much a profit-driven enterprise, and yet we still have a culture that wants to really foster success. And I think key to that, and this is difficult for a lot of law firms, the culture sort of becomes up or out. And maybe that's less so for smaller law firms, but the idea of you will be successful on your own terms or you will be gone, that is really detrimental, at least in terms of being able to balance a profit motive and a culture. On the other hand, if you can foster a culture where, not everybody is going to be great at the business development side. Not everybody is going to be great at being a service partner. You're going to have your own individual contributions, and we're going to find ways to foster the strength that you have in a way that's going to lift the boat for everybody. That's a much more inclusive culture that is going to be able to contribute to profit. I may not be bringing in all the clients, but at the same time, the partner who is bringing in the clients doesn't bill a whole lot of hours. He brings the people through the door. Somebody else does the work, but he's out looking for new business. He's out prospecting because that's what he does well. Is he contributing more than I am? or am I contributing more than he is? Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be that function, or it doesn't have to be that if it's a function of the culture where we're both being recognized for the way we're contributing. It's not necessarily how a lot of law firms think, but it doesn't mean that they can't.
Boy, my first law firm identified its finders. They were compensated on finding. Its grinders, they were compensated on grinding. The minders that are going to take that relationship and grow it, cross-sell it, each contributing in different ways, and their performance is being measured and compensated in different ways. So often we're all measured on the same yardstick. We all need to put in the 1,700 hours. We all need to mentor an associate. We all need to, and what's that about? Some people are better at some things than others.
John, I just have just an additional message on this slide on culture versus profit. I think especially for the firms that are here today, squarely in that mid-law, I don't think it's necessarily always culture versus profit. I would just caution it's culture plus knowing your profit. So many of the firms in this room don't know where they're making money. They don't know. The biggest thing they know is maybe the biggest rainmaker, maybe not even that. I mean, really, where are you guys making money? Where do you want to be making money? And that can be part of your culture. But I think, and that's the overall topic of today, which is understanding, making yourself more profitable. I think that's really just more basics that a lot of the stuff we've talked about today really gets people to understand where their profits are coming from. And then they can do business development around those decisions. But first, all that stuff, culture, all that stuff only works when you understand your profit.
Well, Steve alluded to it. We all want to make more money. We all want to make more money. We're in business. Most of us, 99% of the folks on today's call want to make more money. That's why they're here. Are they willing to do what it takes? Make those tough decisions. And Steve, this is the thing I wanted to put up when you mentioned courageous, the courage to lead. And it may seem scary to grow your firm and jump into these uncharted waters. I love this picture. Courage to lead. And you may think you're jumping into a shark pit, your partners, but they want to eat. They all want to eat. And when you start delivering the goods because you're doing the right things and making those tough decisions, I think it makes for a better culture, a more profitable enterprise, and the rest of it.
I think you hit the nail on the head, John. I don't think culture has to be versus profit if you have the courage to really live to your culture. Many firms have these beautifully articulated cultures, but they don't have the courage to live up to them. And I think if you live up to your culture, profits doesn't become an adversary. It becomes a supplement that says, okay, we're gonna do this right. And to give John his plug, so at least he talks to me after the phone call. That is what led to, I think, him choosing a great topic or heading for this year's management committee, which is for profitability. Leadership is an imperative. You can't get to the profitability you want without leadership, whether it's at the administrative management level, whether it's at the executive committee or management committee or managing partner level. Leadership's an imperative. And it goes through the firm. It's not just leadership of the named managing partner or the named chair. It's leadership permeated through the whole firm that's going to drive profitability.
I'm with you, and I'll throw out the concept of fellowship and holding people accountable to, being good followers. And when we have people that are distracting or disruptive, is that okay? And there's so many things we can talk about. We've been asking this question a bit, Uri, and in New York and elsewhere. What do you think, Bill Josten? You think most firms are optimistic about? We didn't describe what financial performance is. We just tossed out compared to this year. Last year? What are you projecting for this year in terms of financial performance? What do you think, Bill?
I think most of them are probably going to come in around the somewhat better. I mean, lawyers tend to be cautiously optimistic, I think. And frankly, you don't see a lot of lawyers that say, "Oh no, we're definitely going to be struggling this year." So I'm going to go with somewhat better.
Okay, Steve, your prediction?
Somewhat better, because I think 2023 was not across the board a good year. I think there's lots of firms that didn't have the best year, didn't have a year compared to 2022.
Boy, some firms had their best years during COVID, didn't they? And
Yep.
that PPP loan money here in the U.S. certainly didn't hurt. Uri,
Cheap interest rates.
what do you think we got here to this question?
Oh, somewhat better. We've been asking this question. Everybody thinks it's going to be better.
Look at how many say considerably better.
Amazing.
Yeah, 22%. Only one says considerably worse. And with there's a lot going on out there in terms of our economy and the election and a couple of wars, and there may be some things, but most firms seem to be pretty bullish on the current year. There's our courageous slide, and thank you, our panel, Steve.
John, clear the
Bill.
slide poll. Clear the poll.
Thanks for reminding me. I always forget to do that.
Hey, John, while you're doing that, Bill, you mentioned your book. I got messaged. What's the name of your book?
So it was a facetious book. Yeah, it's sort of like, I've read your book, You Glorious Bastard. Yeah, I would love to write a book. If you were to collect everything I've written in any given year, it would be a book. I have a whiteboard hanging over my desk right here. I have 7 reports in process right now.
Bill, can you please share the Canadian? There are some Canadians in the audience. Please tell them about your report coming out in February.
We do. So we have the State of the U.S. Legal Market Report. We have a State of the Canadian Legal Market Report that's due out the 28th of February in conjunction with the Canadian Bar Association. First time we've ever done it. The results on it are really, really interesting. It actually covers a lot of the things that we've talked about today, particularly sort of that forward-looking. Not surprisingly, Canadian law firms are very optimistic as well. There's going to be a lot of really interesting insights. So Steve, I'll make sure that you hit it so that you get it so that your network has access to it. Everything my group does is free. It's open to the public. You can just go to thomsonreuters.com/institute. It's all linked out there. It lives out there forever. But so Uri, that's my book. It's a series of disjointed chapters.
The collected writings.
Steve, here
written by a guy with a high headline and a headset.
We're going to send this around to the follow-up. Bill's referenced this a little bit. It's one of those benchmarking reports every managing partner should read. Comes out every January. There's some other reports out there that they're all coming up with the same conclusions. And I think take a look, weed through those, present some to your partners, get them tuned in on the profitability and the business of law, the business side of running the law firm. We're recorded. We'll put that out there to everybody, the handout material. Our next webinar, we're going to talk about ownership mindset. Ownership mindset among partners. We've got Sharon Abrahams coming to us, as well as David Lakowitz from New York at Moses and Singer. And take a look at our conference in May. We hope to see many of you there.
I know that John doesn't need them, but Bill, I will drive down to get those crumbs off your plate.
He's desperate. What can I say? Steve's
a crumb
desperate.
is a crumb.
Here's our contact information, everybody. Feel free to reach out to any of us. We'd be delighted to chat with you. And thank you again for being with us today, improving profitability at your law firm today, tomorrow. Hope we gave you some good ideas you'll put into action, and see you at an upcoming MPF program. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, John.
And thank you, Uri.
Thank you, John.
Bye, all. Have a good rest of the day.